How is it rocking, Dwayne Nation? Stay here because we are just about to get underway. In the meantime, please like, comment, and subscribe, and ring the bell for notifications. We put out weekly sports content, and we want to continue to build up Dwayne Nation and the brand that is Dwayne Sports. Thank you all, and enjoy. Welcome in, Dwayne Nation. This is your host, Justin Paez, alongside Genoa Agudelo, and we are here to discuss buy low, sell high, pay up, or cash out this week. Going into week 8, we got 6 names to discuss on this episode. 2 buy lows, 1 sell high. Some of my most fun things to kind of watch and scroll on Instagram, TikTok, YouTube. See guys I want to trade for, because trading is very fun in fantasy football. So excited to get down to that. But before we do, how you feeling, Jano?
Yo, Dewey Nation. Justin, I'm feeling good. It was another great week in football. We had a pretty good game there in Detroit on our games or Minnesota for our games of the week. We also had a pretty close game there in Green Bay. We had 2 decent Monday night football games there, Justin. Sunday night was actually a little bit more surprising than I thought it would be. I'm glad to see that Pittsburgh offense take off there, Justin. So great week in football. But now Justin's kind of talk about what we think and what's to go forward, Justin, because every week we learn something new and it's kind of it adds up, and it also affects on how we start players in fantasy.
Yeah, I agree. I agree with that, and especially as you mentioned, we're heading towards week 8 and then week 9 all the way up there, and this episode is focused on trades, and the trade deadline for most leagues is within the next month. So this is kind of that time you need to start diving into it, checking it out, and improving your roster for the playoff run. But I will start us off here as a buy low candidate with the unfortunate news of Brandon Ayuk's torn ACL and MCL. Long road back for Brandon Ayuk, unfortunately. But now you have to look towards what the 49ers are going to do rest of the season. And what we saw when Debo was out was the entrance of Jauan Jennings. We saw more and more of him. He had that massive 40-something point game. Then it obviously came back to earth a little bit. But I think that was because Debo returned. Now Ayuk is the one that's going to be missing the rest of the season. Jauan Jennings steps in, and I think goes right into being a top 25 wide receiver in fantasy football. He is probably out there in some leagues, but mostly is on rosters. And I think people might not be ahead of this curve and just try to trade him, maybe package, try to go for a bigger name and just package Jauan Jennings into it. So the real focus is Jauan Jennings because I think he will be very good in this 49ers offense, and it'll be similar to what we saw earlier in the season, but I like him a lot to be a buy low candidate.
Yeah, Justin, absolutely. When you look at what this 49ers offense, this Super Bowl hangover is legit, and they've struggled with injuries and playmaking, and their team chemistry looked way off, even with Ayuk in the lineup. You gotta question with guys in the offseason making all this fuss and them not performing at the high level. Ayuk is one of them, and he made one of the biggest pout fests all off season, and just to struggle all up at this point. Unfortunately, he's out now for the season. Hopefully he gets healthy and comes back. We're not sure, if he'll play next season. To be honest, just because how late this injury comes, maybe he does probably return next year around week 10 to 13. But looking at this offense now, there's a lot of target share because Debo Samuel went out too in this game, Justin. So that just leaves George Kittle and Ricky Pearsall, the rookie. Thankfully, he is back. He is healthy. He was able to get five targets, 3 catches for 21 yards. This San Francisco offense is going to need some usage there, and they hope to get McCaffrey next week. But I do like Jauan Jennings' matchup against the Dallas Cowboys on Sunday Night Football. Brock Purdy and that offense is going to need to get going. The record, it's very disappointing at 3-4. And they are capable of beating this Dallas Cowboys team. That gives up a lot of just not only the ground game, but on the receiving game as well. And you got to believe that Kyle Shanahan's going to scheme a lot of plays to get Jauan Jennings. And Justin, I like him as a great flex play throughout the season because we don't know how long Debo Samuel is going to be out as well. George Kittle is playing on his last legs, kind of just fuming there. So definitely Jauan Jennings is going to be that go-to guy. and he can definitely put up wide receiver one numbers. And we're looking at a guy that could be a potential league winner. These are the guys. These are when league winners, Justin, fantasy league winners, start to kind of put their shadow, their footprint within the next couple of weeks. Because Justin, once week 13, 14 gets around, these are when these guys take off and they win fantasy championships there, Justin. For me, I'm going to go with Tank Dell. Now, I know it has not been pretty for my beloved Tank Dell, part of my beloved Houston Texans. He finished yesterday with 0 yards in Lambeau, but you gotta remember that C.J. Stroud didn't have a great game himself. C.J. Stroud himself only finished with 86 passing yards. You just gotta tip your hats off to this Green Bay defense. They're very solid, very legit. They have one of the best corners in the league. But these games are games that you have to put behind you, Justin. And looking at the schedule for the Texans, it gets a little better. They play the Colts, who they'll be home against the Colts. They do go to New York and play the Jets, where, by the way, George Pickens had a phenomenal game yesterday with Russell Wilson in his debut. And then they get Detroit there on primetime Sunday night. That could be a potential shootout. And I think that Tank Dell is going to break out eventually. People forget that he did have a pretty crazy injury to end last year. And so, he's kind of working his way back. And I do think that when Nico Collins does come back in a few years, it's going to help Tank Dell a little bit. And this Texans offense is going to get better. These are one of the games that they lost by 2, and they only had 86 passing yards. So definitely this is a guy that you can buy low. Definitely a trade that, you can trade in one person and get 2 in return. And I do like Tank Dell. He's on a phenomenal offense. C.J. Stroud and this offense are going to figure it out. They're still a young team. They barely lost by 2. It wasn't embarrassing. This is a guy that you can buy into. Tank Dell and C.J. Stroud are very close. They have a really good rapport together. So eventually, at some point, Tank Dell's breakout game will be coming soon.
No, I think this game was tough. Obviously, you never want to see a goose egg in the box score for your wide receiver that a good amount of people started, but I also would attribute some of that to how much the Texans were relying on the run game because Joe Mixon was just on fire, and so they didn't really need to always go and pass the ball. But yeah, so I think especially next week with this really good matchup, you can buy them really cheaply against the Colts. I think it's a major bounce back game. This might be CJ's best game of the year going into next week. I think he's up. They lost. He's upset. They go home and they have a prime matchup. So I like Tank Dell. Definitely you can buy him cheap this week. The rest of the season, look at him is I'm kind of on the fence, especially with Nico's return looming. But I think if you get a couple good weeks out of him before Nico returns, maybe you buy him and then you could even sell him for higher than what you got him for. So moving to the sell high side of it, I have Tank Bigsby. Obviously in London he had a phenomenal game against the New England Patriots. Was the RB5 on the week, and people are calling for him to become the workhorse back for Jacksonville over Travis Etienne. I just don't see that happening. I know he has played better. He's looked better. Etienne, I believe, will return from injury this next week or the next one. So I would try to get out as soon as you can, because I think people are seeing this stat line that he put up this week and are going, okay, this guy is legit. You could sell him for a premium, price. And if you look at his schedule the next 4 weeks, he's got three really hard matchups. They play Green Bay, which that's the easy one. So next week, if you want to wait one more week and have a huge week and sell him, sure. But I'd try to get out earlier. But then he plays at Philly. I believe they're top 15. Then they play Minnesota as top 5, Detroit top 5, and then Houston after the bye week is top 10. So it's a really tough stretch after this week for Tank Bigsby. And I think when Etienne returns, it's going to come back to kind of a committee, which nobody likes. And just the fact also that Jacksonville's just a tough team to rely on. Their defense is bad, and I don't think they're going to always be in command of games like they were on Sunday morning. So I think Bigsby is a prime sell high.
Yeah, Justin. I mean, this Jacksonville really only beats up on really bad teams. Their only 2 victories are against the Colts without AR, and they could have lost that game too. And the other victories in London against the Patriots behind a rookie quarterback. But next week you mentioned they have Green Bay, and that defense is legit. You have to question that If Green Bay goes up, and this Jags offense is playing catch up, Tank Bigsby won't be a factor at all. We saw when they were behind 2 weeks ago in London against the Bears, they didn't really look to Bigsby's way, rather to Dearness Johnson, kind of whenever ETN went out. So definitely Tank Bigsby's a guy you can trade away. And as well as with ETN possibly returning, this Packers defense did give up a lot yesterday to the Texans. But I do feel like this is an offense that you cannot rely on whatsoever. The only reliable player that you can really rely on is just Brian Thomas Jr., the rookie.
Mm-hmm.
But as far as the running game, Jacksonville potentially could be down a lot within the next 3 weeks. They play Green Bay, they play Philly, in Philadelphia, and then they play Minnesota. Not to mention the week after that they play Detroit. So those 4 games within the next month, Justin, they could be well behind. And I want to add that they do play the Texans right after that. So the next 5 games are against really good teams. They could be behind by tons. We are not sure how this running game is going to catch up and adapt. And these one of these, I would say 3 out of these next 5 matchups, Justin, can be blowouts until the point where Trevor Lawrence and that, he's throwing 35, 40 passes a game. We're not getting any attempts from the rushing, handoffs with ETN back. So that does lower the value of Tanks Bigsby there, Justin. So really good. I like that for you. For me, I'm going to go with the player who's actually has been performing well and probably will continue all year, and that's with T. Higgins. Look, I love T. Higgins. There's no doubt that the Bengals are a little bit are on the upcome now. Starting off rough. They have now won 2 straight. They have a tough one in Philadelphia, and I'm not saying to bench T. Higgins or anything like that. He's a must start. But there's a pattern, Justin, where T. Higgins, he is great, and he had this back-to-back years where he has a couple good games, Justin, and then he has a random goose egg with injury. And that's my concern with T. Higgins. He started off the year very, slow, and it wasn't until these past couple weeks he's kind of been taking off there. And you gotta really be cautious with how T. Higgins and this Bengals offense really kind of how they move, Justin. It's just something about this Bengals team is a little bit concerning, even though they've won. We got to remember, Justin, that the victories this year is coming against Carolina, the Giants, and Cleveland. They do play, Philly. They do have to play Baltimore, the Chargers. They do have to play Pittsburgh along the way. And you got to remember, in the fantasy playoffs, they do get the Broncos there. So that's a little bit of a concern with T. Higgins. Obviously, you're not trading Jamar Chase, but with T. Higgins, he just has this history of having a great couple games in a row, and then he, misses a game through injury, and then we don't hear from T. Higgins for a couple weeks. That's been the thing, and that just concerns me slightly. So I would say, Justin, definitely sell high on T. Higgins right now while you can. He scored a touchdown the past couple weeks. Definitely get a guy in George Pickens. Maybe offer a T. Higgins and a lower value player for a Brian Thomas Jr., a guy that's going to be getting that volume. And you can definitely find trades to send T. Higgins. A lot of people need wide receiver twos, so T. Higgins is that guy. But definitely be concerned with T. Higgins for now.
Interesting. I'm also I'm on the fence with this one. I think T. Higgins he's been very good, right? As you mentioned, he's been on a good tear recently. The reason I can't be on the train of selling him high is the fact that he's actually gotten more targets than Jamar Chase in 4 straight weeks, and he has 3 straight good matchups. So he plays the Eagles, then he plays the oh my gosh, why am I blanking? Then he plays Baltimore, or then he plays Vegas, then he plays Baltimore. So I think all those games are good matchups for him. And I think I will be on the train that you are on in about 2 to 3 weeks, because after he plays those 3 games, then he plays the Chargers, Pittsburgh, Dallas, Tennessee, Cleveland, and Denver. All very solid, either average to hard matchups after week 11. So I would stay at that point is where I'm looking to trade him, but I think I can still utilize him for 1 to 2 more weeks before looking forward. But then I'll be on your side with that. But moving to back to the happy land of being buying low, getting some guys for cheap. I'm going with Jayden Reed of the Green Bay Packers. We looked at this game. We were like, okay, it's a pretty good matchup against Houston. We think it's going to be a shootout. Not for Jayden Reed. Only 2 catches for 10 yards. very underwhelming performance. I had him in a league. It was rough to see. I had him and Deontay Johnson. They got me like 4 points combined um, between those two. And with Reed though, to me he's still the clear alpha wide receiver one for this football team. But it's showing more and more that they do have three other very solid wide receivers, Wicks, Watson, and Dobb, and it can kind of be on a week to week basis where we see involvement from them as well. And maybe Jayden Reed got the Derek Stingley treatment this week, where he was being shadowed, but maybe that's what caused some things. I don't know if the injury last week is nagging him at all. But it just wasn't a good week, right? And so people are very down on him. And so I think that's where you can look to, hey, let's buy this guy because his season has been very good prior to this week. He scored 10 points in four of his 5 games that he's played fully, and we've seen two massive performances in week 1 and week 4.
Yeah.
So we've seen the ceiling. We see the ceiling. He has the quarterback. And I just think he is still the wide receiver one for this team, and people might be sleeping on him a little bit more. And you can swoop right in and scoop him and trade for him on cheap.
And yeah, Justin, in fact, it could start next week. He has a great matchup at Jacksonville, like we were just speaking about. So that defense is very bad. That secondary is very bad. Drake May was able to have 276 yards, and I think Jordan Love could have a better game. And that kind of starts with Jayden Reed. And so, Justin, not to mention, he does get handoffs. Kind of in the goal, kind of in the red zone area. He has a couple rushing touchdowns, I believe, on the season. So definitely, Jayden Reed's a guy you can buy low for sure. For me, Justin, it's a guy that I don't really think people would buy so low on. But it's James Cook. He did score a touchdown this week, but Justin, you got to look at this volume. Kind of in the handoffs and the carries department there for Buffalo. Ray Davis is kind of sneaking up on there, and James Cook is a guy that a lot of people are a little bit. Some people don't really know how to feel about him. But James Cook, he only had 32 yards, and he had no catches, no receiving yards, which I find interesting, which he usually does. James Cook is a great, receiving back, probably one of the best in the league. I would say, a top 5 receiving back there. He gets dump off passes for one of the best quarterbacks in the league. For the past couple weeks there, Justin, obviously he missed last week to a turf toe, and he has had some weeks where he didn't do much, like at Baltimore. But I feel like you could buy low on him and really get a running back that could potentially still give you RB1, RB2 numbers. Because Ray Davis is a guy that he is going to be getting touches, goal line touches, because Ray Davis is more of a power back, as James Cook is a most definite speed back, and that could be a little bit of a concern to some fantasy managers. But for some managers that are struggling in the running back department, James Cook is a guy that you could trade, not give too much for, and still have an RB1 to save your season. And he hasn't really rushed over 100 yards at all this year. And so he is 24th in the league rushing yards, but he is tied 7th with touchdowns there. But we do like his ability to catch the ball there. So I would say definitely, buy low on him. He hasn't had a crazy fantasy game yet. Obviously the first 2 weeks he was pretty good. But the past couple weeks, he's been going down a little bit, and Ray Davis is pretty much the biggest concern, as well as Josh Allen's rushing ability. So I'd say James Cook is a guy that you can definitely buy low on, and I think that he could be a fantasy league winner though later in the year.
No, I like James Cook. I think that it's well worth to try to trade for him. People might be thinking that Ray Davis will take too many touches for us to be happy with Cook's fantasy output, but I think both can still succeed in this offense. Obviously, this week wasn't super crazy. He did score a touchdown, but he's being more, he's coming off the injury. So I think last week is more of a ramp up into the next 3 weeks, which are very solid matchups with the Seahawks, the Dolphins, and the Colts. So I think Cook's, well worth the spot there. We saw last year him end the season as the RB3 over the back, I think like 6 to 7 weeks.
Yeah.
So we see the ceiling. I think Amari Cooper opens up this offense even more. So I think it helps James Cook in that regard. So I agree. I think he's well worth a trade offer and maybe hopefully the the manager is down on him, so you can get him for a little bit cheaper of a price. But yeah, Dewey Nation, that is our pay up, cash out segment, our buy low and sell high for going into week 8. But yes, thank you for listening. We had 2 buy lows, 1 sell high. So get out there and throw some trade offers around. It makes the league more fun. It also can help you win your fantasy championship. So thank you guys for listening. Like, comment, subscribe, everything like that, please. We would love that here at Dwayne Sports. And Genoa, send us out.
Yeah, Dewey Nation, thank you guys for watching. This is now officially the time of the year where you make your push towards the fantasy playoffs. It's not over yet, no matter what your record may be. So definitely start looking to make some trades. This is the week. This week and next week, I would say, Justin, maybe the second week max. I think that's when the deadline kind of kicks in there in most leagues, Justin. So definitely, Dewey Nation, start looking for some trades. Make the run to your fantasy playoffs. Win that money. Win that bragging rights there. Dewey Nation, we love you guys. Thanks for watching. And as always, peace.